Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Donovan, live on WSYR Plus. We're at the News Channel 9 studios on Bridge Street in East Syracuse. We're in our WSYR Plus studio, and we're going to analyze and recap the Marcy prison trial and the verdict that came down this week. I was in Utica for 2 weeks and change. I'm back in Syracuse, and people are still talking about this very surprising verdict from an Oneida County jury. In a few minutes, we're going to talk with Rick Trunfio, who formerly worked for Bill Fitzpatrick at the Onondaga County District Attorney's Office as his lead deputy. But before that, we're going to bring in one of the defense attorneys who actually represented one of the former correction officers who was acquitted on all charges. Kevin Lewibrand is joining me from his office in Albany. Kevin and I spent a lot of time passing each other in the hallway the past 2 weeks, and he was always focused and was definitely probably the most vocal of the defense attorneys representing his client. Kevin, thanks for making time for us. I'm sure you're just kind of adjusting to normal life post-trial. How are you feeling now as the week wraps up? The week started with an acquittal of your client.
Yeah, he deserves an acquittal. He wasn't guilty. It was important that the jury paid attention to the evidence, which they did. The public didn't see all the evidence, and the evidence was a real focus on the videos, because the videos are what kept Matt Gallagher from being convicted. They supported his version of events.
Dive into that a little deeper. What did you see or not see in the videos that helped defend your client?
So Matt Gallagher didn't know about the prior assaults of Mr. Brooks either before or after he arrived in Marcy. He came into a room. He was in a room for 5 seconds, and officers began beating Mr. Brooks without cause. And the beating took only several seconds, about 4 seconds. And then the officers and none of the sergeants, there were two sergeants in the room. They didn't move. One had his hands in his pocket, and the other had a smile on his face for some inexplicable reason. The guards then tried to get Mr. Brooks onto the medical gurney, and they tried 3 times. And as they did so, each time they got rougher. They got very rough. The force was excessive. And Matt Gallagher, his sergeant was in front of him. He stepped past his sergeant, moved his sergeant out of the way, went over to the gurney to help the officers get Mr. Brooks onto the gurney so that the violence would stop. He did that, and as soon as he got Mr. Brooks onto the gurney, the officers began beating Mr. Brooks again. Matt Gallagher was directed to leave the room by his supervising sergeant to fetch leg shackles, and he did that. And when he came back, he applied the leg shackles, and that's the extent of his involvement in any kind of force.
Why do you think he was charged with murder based on what you seem to point out as a pretty simple evidence against it?
His sergeant lied to the grand jury. His sergeant told the grand jury that Matt Gallagher had struck Mr. Brooks twice. That was false. When the sergeant testified at the actual trial, he didn't include that testimony because he knew it was false, and he knew that the videos didn't support that. The sergeant was trying to do anything he could and everything he could to avoid his own responsibility, and that included trying to involve Matt Gallagher wrongfully in what was done to Mr. Brooks.
How did this case end up across your desk to begin with? I know we're going back to the incident itself happened in December, and then between February and March were indictments and initial court appearances. How did you end up representing Matt Gallagher?
So I do a lot of criminal defense work, a real lot, and I happen to be in the Albany area, and the union that represents all the correctional officers happens to be based in the Albany area, and they gave some lawyer names to the COs, and Matt Gallagher happened to be the one that connected with me. I also have a defendant on the other assault case, the other murder case at Mid-State Correctional Facility that's coming up for trial at the end of January.
When I've talked to you in the days since the verdict, you made it sound like Matt Gallagher was uniquely someone you wanted to represent because you felt he was not guilty. Would you have not taken any of these cases? Was there something specific about his innocence in your mind that you wanted to represent him? Because you're seemingly being critical of other officers that maybe couldn't have gotten away with it. Matt seemed to be someone that you believed in from the beginning and who was telling the truth.
Yeah, from the beginning, I believed in him, and he believed in himself. he from the start said he told me not to engage in any plea bargain negotiations, that he knew he didn't do anything wrong, that he did what he was supposed to do under very difficult circumstances, and he refused any plea negotiations. Most of the other officers, and I think all of the other officers, their lawyers, at least tried to engage in plea bargain negotiations. And to the credit of Bill Fitzpatrick, he had a very successful case. He successfully convicted or got plea agreements for serious charges from upwards of 10 known people that we know. Like, there may even be more that we don't know yet, for various serious charges, which has never been done in New York State prior to this case. It just so happens that Matt Gallagher was not guilty. The evidence showed him to be not guilty, and he should not have been prosecuted. And I do think that, in reflection, that maybe the special prosecutor might conclude the same at this point in time.
How's he doing after what I imagine is just an unimaginable relief?
Yeah, so what happens in these cases is the people that support you no matter what the allegations are. The people that kind of know you start to be suspicious of you. They start to think, well, maybe there's something wrong. Or they say, I saw him drive out one night. Maybe he's a bad guy. And the people that know nothing and are gossipers, they just eat it up. And it creates a real dark environment that follows someone around. It follows them to the grocery store, to when they go pick up their kids at school, to when they talk to the kids' teachers. And it just is a dark, dark time. And you don't recover that immediately upon a not guilty verdict. There's people that are still out there saying that Matt Gallagher and all the officers should have been found guilty. And so that's kind of what follows him. He lost his career. He was fired by docs. He didn't receive any support from docs right up until the governor, who unfortunately said she was disappointed by the not guilty finding. She should have been supportive, because this is her guy, these are her guys who are out there on the front lines. And by him being found not guilty, it should have been a message that she could have said, hey, there's some good officers, or there's some officers that weren't involved and they were found vindicated. And that really is the message that should have gone out, and it didn't. I understand it's politics.
I don't even know if everyone watching my coverage knows I'm from Oneida County, born and raised. Before I worked in Syracuse, I lived there. I know people who know Matt Gallagher, and a lot of people said that he was a great guy and didn't expect this of him. So that's to your point about how people that do know him might start to question all the things they hear on the news or see in the video, especially when people are lumped together like that. I haven't really had an appropriate place to share that information until now. That I know people that like the guy. And so to your point that it probably takes time to rebuild all that.
It does. It's a lot. We went through, the jury pool was 200 jurors, prospective jurors. We went through every single one. There were no prospective jurors left when we selected the jury. And the reason for that was better than half of the 200 who went up to speak to us and the judge during the selection process said that they saw the video, and in their view, they can't change their minds. They're all guilty, and they were then not allowed to be on the jury. And that was the generalized community reaction. They saw the video, shame on the officers, and that's without looking at and focusing in on Matt Gallagher and what he did or didn't do during that tragic night for Robert Brooks.
You weren't the defense attorney for anyone else. Do you see criminal wrongdoing in that video when you look at other people?
Oh, I see loads of it. So I'm half my work is civil rights. I do civil rights. I've sued docs probably more than most people in the state. And what happened to Robert Brooks that was not on video was horrific. There was testimony about that. I have no reason to doubt that testimony. And then what happened in the room on multiple occasions by at least 4 officers, perhaps 5, was illegal, immoral, unconscionable, and they should have been prosecuted, and they were, and most of them have accepted responsibility for what they did.
Yeah, you have 6 of the officers convicted of either manslaughter or murder right at this point, with other officers with lesser charges headed to prison for some time. As I begin to wrap up my conversation with you, one of the things you and I talked about on Monday was and you know this from your suing of docs, the prison system itself. You very much point the finger at the prison system, and it sounds like you have something in common with the Brooks family. You're the defense; they're somewhat represented by the prosecution. You're both pointing fingers at the prison system.
It's really terrible. It's so terrible the way the system's run. I anecdotally, I'll tell you, even today, I had a poor guy call me from the prison system who's being shaken down by the Bloods and Crips. He's been required to, uh, if he doesn't receive a package with drugs in it, they're going to harm his daughter because they have connections on the outside. He submitted notes to his counselor. He submitted notes to the COs, and nobody did a thing about it. And this poor guy is hanging. That's what happens in the prison. There's horrible, terrible people who are in prison for offenses. And there are also guards who don't have training, don't have supervision, and some are bad to begin with, either because they started out bad or the system has jaded them to make them bad, make them indifferent. That's created this terrible environment for that's non-functional in many respects, and it drives towards these exact situations that happened to Robert Brooks. That's what happens when the system doesn't work as it's supposed to. And Robert Brooks wasn't beaten once. He was beaten at least 5 times, 5 different distinct times from December the 7th to December the 9th, many of which involve multiple correction officers, multiple inmates. And that's how the system works for a lot of the fellows who are incarcerated.
I asked you on Monday if the governor called you what you'd suggest to her, and you said you have pages, some from your study of the Robert Brooks situation and the defense of Matt Gallagher, other from your civil rights experience suing docs. Can you name a couple of things you think should change tomorrow?
Yeah, so body cameras don't work. You have to have fixed cameras throughout the facility. Every inch of the facility has to be covered with a fixed camera. The body cameras aren't worn by guards. They're turned on and off when they choose to. They become lost in the system by people that want them to be lost. That would be certainly number one. The second is the training. The training of the officers is pathetic. For example, the duty to intervene, that was a big thing. They didn't intervene, and we showed the jury that the training on the duty to intervene was literally a 43-second reading of a doc's policy. That was the extent of the training. So what's an officer to do when he's in a room and his bosses are in the room and there's a beating of an inmate going on and the bosses have their hands in their pockets doing nothing? What are they supposed to do? They can't push the bosses around. They can't yell and scream. They can't run out. They're now in a spot and they have no training, no idea how to get out of that spot to help the inmate and to stop the violence. So those are two that I would rip right off the top of my head.
I know you have a mid-state trial up ahead. How do you, so you can't totally forget what you've learned through this first case, but as you do put the Gallagher case to rest, how do you kind of close this chapter of your career?
Well, it's certainly not close. It's a big defending people who are accused of crimes is what I do. I move on from here to a death penalty case in the federal courts in the Albany area that I have responsibility for. That's coming up sometime next year, and I have many other criminal cases, and I have lots of civil cases. I have a full office and full staff that supported me throughout the trial, which is, I think, why I could be as effective as I was on behalf of Matt.
Did you spend the nights in Utica?
Mixed. It's an
Okay.
hour and 35-minute ride for me.
Yeah.
Some days I stayed, some I went home.
Okay. Um, well, Kevin, you were a class act through the trial. Not being too mad at me for covering you in the hallway and getting shots of you in the hallway. And I appreciate that and appreciate your willingness to talk to us on Monday and again here today.
Thank you.
All right. Be well. We'll talk again soon. We're going to take a break. When WSYR Plus live streaming continues, we'll have Rick Trunfio, a former lead deputy to Onondaga County District Attorney Bill Fitzpatrick, who's been watching this case with a critical eye, and he'll share some of his insights when we continue on WSYR Plus. You're watching WSYR Plus. I'm Andrew Donovan with a recap and an analysis of the Marcy prison trial. You saw him a moment ago from the camera over my shoulder, but Rick Trentfio is joining us in our digital studio. He's been very generous with his time, Rick, and we appreciate that. You've been giving us a very expert eye on this as it's gone on now. 3 weeks for the trial, and the case has been going on almost a year now. So thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
We talked Monday. Now that you've rested on it a little bit, what are you thinking about related to the verdict?
Well, a couple of things. I think that the video, which first of all shocked the world, and then second became the critical piece of evidence in this case, rightly so. I think the video was really dispositive of the ultimate verdict. I think that the jury was focused on the video, but they were also focused on their role. And I think that's really important for people, whose experience watching the court system is usually Hollywood-based scripts like Law and Order. The coverage and the verdict actually, hopefully, educates people about our criminal justice system. And what those attorneys were responsible for was not a group defense, but a defense solely of the client that they represented. And I think that when I look back on my initial commentary, which was it's almost like 3 trials, right? Each of these attorneys is representing their client to the best of their abilities, zealously representing their client. That's their role. I think that the attorneys that focused on the video showed that, and the jury believed it, that their conduct did not rise to the level of murder, manslaughter first, nor gang assault. And I think that, knowing D.A. Fitzpatrick, I think that he would have been satisfied with gang assault verdicts on those 2 that got acquitted. I think that's what he argued. I think that his theory of the case was that they acted as a gang, that their failure to act was part of his theory of the case. And I think that the jury just kept looking at the video and said, we're not really sure that they did anything that caused his death. And I think that's the key here, is the jury was looking at what caused his death. And neither of the defendants that got acquitted did much of anything except what they said in their defense. What their defense theory was what they were trained to do. I think one of them pepper sprayed him, and one of them put shackles on his legs.
Mm-hmm. I've said this on television the past few weeks, that Bill Fitzpatrick is a prolific trial lawyer. Shouldn't he have seen that defense coming, and did he overcharge the 2 who were acquitted with murder?
Let me say this. He's not just prolific. He's legendary. Probably one of the best trial attorneys in the state. I think that you have to understand it from his perspective. He did not have to take this case. He was a special prosecutor. His jurisdiction is Onondaga County. This case was a hornet's nest in terms of just the video already being out in the public, judgments that were made about the 10 corrections officers, and the fact that he agreed to take it. And I'm sure that there was a list of district attorneys or not just prosecutors, but defense attorneys who have criminal practice that they looked at. And the fact that he took this just shows that he's not afraid to try difficult cases. I think that his theory of the case was that this was a constellation of injuries, constellation of conduct that caused Mr. Brooks's death. And so I think the theory of his case wasn't necessarily faulty. I think that the video spoke volumes not only to the two that were acquitted, but to the person who was convicted of depraved indifference murder.
The district attorney has kindly agreed to join me on my Newsmakers broadcast, which will air tomorrow. Have you talked to him? Do you know how he's doing?
We've exchanged some text messages. Listen, I've known Bill a long time. I worked for him a long time, tried cases with him, and I've also had a front seat at some of the more high-profile cases he's tried alone. And I can tell you that he's disappointed in the verdict. But the one thing that that DA Fitzpatrick and any good prosecutor respects is the process and the jury's verdict. And I think that he respects the jury's verdict. I think he understands the jury's verdict. But I know he's disappointed, and I'm sure that he's not happy that there were 2 acquittals in that trial. On the flip side of that, and I'll say this, with this, it's very difficult to get a depraved indifference murder conviction. The New York State Court of Appeals has really diluted that charge from when I first started practicing law, and you see it rarely used. I think even D.A. Fitzpatrick would have been happy with a manslaughter in the first degree, where the elements are intent to commit serious physical injury causing death, because I think that under no theory, looking at that video, or I think that you can't legally go forward with an intentional murder. You could try, but I think that the intent was the depraved mind, what the law terms as the utter disregard for human life. That's a really difficult standard, and the fact that he was able to convince the jury of that, I think, speaks to his talent as a trial attorney. So while I'm sure he's disappointed in those 2 acquittals, I don't want to have anybody overlook what he accomplished in getting a murder conviction.
Scott is doing our technical work today. Scott, there's that graphic we have that shows the three people who are on trial. If we could bring that up. But you see David Kingsley there, the former correction officer who was convicted of murder and manslaughter, and then you see beneath him the 2 former officers who were acquitted, found not guilty on all charges against them. Rick is here talking about the guilty verdict against Officer David Kingsley, former officer at this point. Not to mention 8 other co-defendants who pled guilty. It wasn't a jury trial. They took plea agreements. They pled guilty. And then there could be a 10th because there's still a trial coming up in January. So Bill Fitzpatrick could have already has multiple and could have more success on this case. The vast majority of officers involved are going to prison.
Yeah. And I think that's the key here is accountability. You know, when you look at this incident that caused this individual's death, for me, it really exposed the culture of that prison. And I thought the defense did an admirable job. We've spent a lot of time on D.A. Fitzpatrick, but I thought Kevin did a really good job. You said something to him about being a class act, and I think he's a successful attorney. I know people that I've never gone against Kevin, or I've never had any professional dealings with him, but I know a lot of people in Albany that have. He's a very good attorney. And I think that he defended his client in a way that defense attorneys, where there is this prejudgment already because that video was out there, that's a difficult case to defend. And I think that by not having his client testify. I was surprised, I'll be honest with you, that nobody testified from the defense, because in a case like that, the jury wants to hear some remorse. They want to hear what the cooperating witness said. I'm ashamed. They want to hear that. But I think in this case, it was a Sophie's choice, because then they would have to be cross-examined by Bill Fitzpatrick. So I do think that that they made some very good strategic decisions, and their theory of the case was argued, look at the video, our clients did nothing.
You talk about how the appellate court has diluted the depraved indifference option. When you're David Kingsley's defense team, do you look to appeal at the higher level? One, because the two co-defendants were acquitted, and I heard one of the defense attorneys of the acquitted officer saying, it seems like a conflicting verdict. I'm not sure the video shows a conflicting verdict, but overall it could appear to be a conflicting verdict. What are the appeal chances for the one who was convicted?
So that's very interesting, because it's really not a conflicting verdict. And the reason why it's not a conflicting verdict is that the whole theory of the defense was that these individuals acted individually, right? That these defendants each acted individually, and that the proof, the video shows two of them not doing much of anything, and Kingsley actually putting his hands on him and doing something violent.
Very violent.
Right.
Behavior towards his neck specifically.
Right. So I actually think the appellate courts are going to look at it and say, actually, the jury did exactly what they were supposed to do, not consider them as a group or group conduct, but consider their conduct individually. And so I'm not sure that conflicting verdicts will be an issue. Depraved indifference will always be an issue, because what the court will look at is, did the conduct rise to this utter disregard for human life? And that's always going to be an issue.
Do you have any suggestions for the prison system? I'll ask Bill Fitzpatrick that, because he studied this intensely, but anything from your experience or your review of this case?
Listen, I think that part of the defense theory was that being a corrections officer is a very difficult job. You're surrounded by criminals, by a lot of violent offenders, and I do think that's true. However, they're also responsible for the safety and security of those prisoners who they oversee, and it was shocking to see. But I think it exposed a culture, and I mean that in this way. It wasn't just a few officers hitting him. It was a number of people in the room who didn't do anything, didn't say, hey, we're going too far here. That tells me that there's a culture. And then to have, while this case is pending, have the institution right across the street, Midstate, have a similar incident, similar conduct with another inmate dead, tells me that that entire institution of docs, they have to have retraining, and they have to reconfirm that, yes, their job is to hold the prisoners in a way that that allows for the corrections officer to feel safe, but also treat them with dignity, in the sense that they're human beings, and they have a duty to ensure that those inmates are not harmed in any way.
All right, we have to go.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your
You're welcome.
analysis throughout this entire trial. Thank you for your service to this community. That does it for us. I'm Andrew Donovan on WSYR Plus, joined by Rick Trunfio and our technical man of the day, Scott Haight. For everyone watching, we really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.